The storm arrived before she did. Seren Hale pressed her face against the rain-streaked window of the hired carriage, watching lightning split the sky above Thornwood Hall. The estate emerged from the darkness in flashes, a sprawling stone fortress perched on the Cornish cliffs, its windows glowing like suspicious eyes against the black. She should have arrived hours ago. The broken axle outside Truro had cost her 4 hours, and most of her remaining composure. Now it was nearly midnight, the rain was falling in sheets, and she was about to present herself to a household that wasn't expecting her until tomorrow. The carriage lurched to a stop. Seren gathered her single traveling case, the leather worn soft from years of use, and stepped into the downpour. By the time she reached the front entrance, her cloak was soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, and whatever dignity she'd hoped to present had drowned somewhere in the courtyard. The door opened before she could knock. A butler stood in the frame, his face arranged in an expression of profound disapproval. Behind him, candlelight flickered across marble floors and oak-paneled walls. Warmth spilled out like a promise. "The household has retired," the butler announced. His voice suggested she had committed a grave social crime by existing at this hour. "I'm Seren Hale. Lady Heloise engaged me as an archivist. I was expected this afternoon, but the carriage broke down and—" "The household," he repeated, "has retired." Seren felt the cold seeping through her boots, felt exhaustion pulling at her bones. 3 weeks ago, she'd been locked in her stepfather's house, counting the days until he sold her to a man 40 years her senior. 2 weeks ago, she'd climbed through a window at midnight with stolen coins sewn into her petticoat. 1 week ago, Lady Heloise Ashford's letter had found her at a coaching inn, offering employment, shelter, salvation. She was not going back into that storm. "Then I'll wait in the entrance hall until morning." Seren stepped forward, forcing the butler to either move or be walked through. "I won't disturb anyone." The butler, Mr. Halstead, she would later learn, moved. Barely. She stood dripping on the marble, taking in the vaulted ceilings, the ancestral portraits lining the walls, the carved staircase sweeping upward into shadow. Thornwood Hall smelled of beeswax and old books and something indefinably ancient. It smelled like safety. Voices drifted from somewhere above, muffled at first, then sharper as a door opened. "Precisely the point, Mother. You don't consult me. You simply announce decisions as though my opinion holds no weight in my own house. Your house." A woman's voice, calm but edged. "Interesting how quickly it became yours when the responsibilities suit you, Kaelin." Serene's stomach tightened. She knew she should stay silent, stay invisible, and wait to be properly summoned. But the argument was about her. She could hear her name in the spaces between accusations. "An archivist." The man's voice dripped contempt. "You've invited a stranger to catalog Father's papers, his private correspondence, his personal documents, without asking whether I might have concerns about someone unknown rifling through our family's history. She comes with excellent references. Mrs. Pemberton in Devon spoke highly of her work. Mrs. Pemberton runs a household, not a security assessment. What do we actually know about this woman? Where does she come from? Who is her family?" The voices grew closer. Footsteps descended the staircase. "Her family is irrelevant. Her skills are what matter." Her skills could include deception, theft, and espionage. Have you considered that someone might want access to Father's papers for reasons other than scholarly interest? Seren's hands clenched at her sides. She thought of her stepfather's accusations, the lies he'd spread about her, the reputation he'd tried to destroy. She thought of every man who'd ever decided her worth based on suspicion rather than evidence. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. 2 figures emerged into the candlelight. Lady Heloise Ashford was smaller than Seren had expected, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, dressed in mourning black despite the late hour. Her son towered beside her, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, his face carved into hard lines that might have been handsome if they weren't arranged in fury. Caelan Ashford, the Duke of Thornwood, 31 years old according to the London papers. Unmarried according to the gossips. Impossible according to every servant who'd whispered warnings when they learned where she was heading. His gaze found her immediately. Ice-blue eyes swept from her sodden hair to her ruined boots, cataloging every detail, finding her wanting. "Who let you in?" "Your butler," though reluctantly. "The household has retired." His voice was cold enough to make the storm outside seem temperate. "You may seek accommodation in the village." "The village is 3 miles away. The roads are flooded, and my carriage has already departed." Seren lifted her chin, refusing to let her shivering undermine her words. "I was engaged by Lady Heloise to begin work tomorrow. I intend to be here when tomorrow arrives." A flicker of surprise crossed his features, that a drowned woman in a ruined cloak would speak to him without deference. "Mother." He didn't look away from Seren. "Did you inform this woman that her employment was conditional on my approval?" "I informed her that she had a position. That's all she needed to know." "Then you misled her." A muscle worked in his cheek. "Miss Hale, was it?" "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The position is no longer available." The words struck like blows. Seren felt the ground shifting beneath her, felt the careful plans she'd constructed crumbling into nothing. But she'd spent too many years under her stepfather's roof, learning to survive men who wielded power like weapons. She'd learned that cowering only invited cruelty. She'd learned that sometimes the only way forward was through. "There's been no misunderstanding." She held his gaze, watching his expression harden. "Lady Eloise offered me employment. I traveled 200 miles to accept it. I've arrived, as promised, to begin my duties. If you wish to terminate my position, you may do so in the morning, after I've had a chance to demonstrate my qualifications." Behind her, the butler made a strangled sound. Lady Heloise's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. The Duke stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the tension in his shoulders, the barely restrained anger in his eyes. "You're refusing to leave my house." "I'm requesting shelter for the night. In the morning, I'll present my credentials. If you still find them insufficient, I'll go." "And if I have you removed now? Then you'll be sending a woman into a storm that's already claimed one carriage tonight." Seren's voice didn't waver. "That seems beneath a duke's dignity, but I've been wrong about men before." The quiet that followed felt like held breath. Outside, thunder rolled across the cliffs. Lady Heloise touched her son's arm. "She has spirit, Caelan, and she's right. We can't send her into that storm. We can do whatever we choose in our own house. We can, but we won't." Lady Heloise's voice carried a quiet authority that even the Duke seemed unable to ignore. "Mrs. Bramwell will prepare a room. Miss Hale will stay the night, and in the morning, you can decide whether your pride is worth more than Father's library finally being organized." The Duke's gaze remained locked on Seren. "Move you make." His voice dropped to "move you make." His voice dropped to something dangerous. One mistake. One misplaced document. One suspicious action. One single reason to doubt your intentions, and you'll leave Thornwood Hall in disgrace. Do you understand? Seren understood that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. "Perfectly, Your Grace." He turned and disappeared into the shadows, his footsteps echoing against stone. Lady Heloise watched him go, something sad and knowing in her expression. "Don't mind him, Miss Hale. His bark is considerably worse than his bite." Seren looked at the darkness where he'd vanished. She wasn't entirely sure that was true. Morning arrived wrapped in mist and uncertainty. Seren woke to pale light filtering through unfamiliar curtains, her body stiff from tension, her mind already racing through the day ahead. The room they'd given her was modest, but clean. tucked in the east wing where the servants' quarters met the main house. Neither guest nor staff, she occupied the same liminal space as her employment, if she still had employment. She dressed carefully in her best gray wool, the fabric threadbare at the cuffs, but still respectable. Her hair she pinned severely back, every strand controlled, nothing left to chance. The mirror showed a woman who looked competent, serious, and older than her 24 years. That woman would have to be enough. Mrs. Bramwell appeared at precisely 7 o'clock, her face revealing nothing. "His Grace will see you in the study. Follow me." The halls of Thornwood Hall looked different in daylight, less threatening, more melancholy. Dust motes drifted through shafts of pale sun. Portraits watched her pass with painted eyes. The study door stood open. Inside, the Duke sat behind a massive oak desk, papers arranged with military precision before him. He didn't look up when she entered. "Close the door." She did. "Sit." A single chair faced the desk. Seren sat, back straight, hands folded in her lap. For a long moment he continued writing. The scratch of his pen against paper filled the room. When he finally looked up, his expression was granite. "I've made inquiries this morning. Mrs. Pemberton in Devon does speak highly of your work. She says you cataloged her late husband's library in 3 months and discovered 2 volumes thought lost for decades." "That's correct." "She also says you appeared at her door with no references, no history, and no explanation of where you'd come from." His eyes narrowed. "She says you told her you'd been a governess in Yorkshire, but when I pressed for details, she admitted she never verified that claim." Seren's pulse quickened. She kept her voice level. "I worked for the Ashmore family for 2 years. They can confirm my employment." "The Ashmores emigrated to India 8 months ago. Convenient." "Unfortunate. Not convenient." Irritation flickered across his features, or perhaps reluctant interest in her refusal to crumble. He set down his pen. "My mother believes everyone deserves a second chance. She's helped women before, women fleeing difficult circumstances. She thinks I don't notice, but I notice everything that happens in this house." Seren said nothing. Her pulse drummed against her throat. "Are you fleeing something, Miss Hale?" The question hung between them. She could lie. She could craft a story of orphaned gentility, of unfortunate circumstances nobly overcome. But she remembered how her stepfather's lies had spread like poison, and she knew that dishonesty, once discovered, and destroyed everything it touched. "Yes." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You admit it." "I'm fleeing a situation that was dangerous to remain in. I'm not fleeing justice or debt or scandal." She met his gaze directly. "I'm fleeing a man who wanted to control me and couldn't accept that I refused to be controlled." Neither spoke for a moment. Outside, a gull cried against the wind. "Your stepfather." She went very still. "You've made inquiries." "I told you. I notice everything." He leaned back in his chair, studying her like a specimen. "Mortimer Vane married your mother when you were 12, inherited her modest estate when she died 5 years ago. Currently residing in Somerset, and, according to his neighbors, telling anyone who'll listen that his ungrateful stepdaughter stole from him and vanished in the night." The words settled into her stomach like stones. "He's lying." "Is he?" "I took money that was rightfully mine. £200 from my mother's estate that he'd locked away. Money she intended for me, not for his gambling debts." Her voice remained steady through sheer will. "I took back what he stole first. That's your version. That's the truth." He stared at her for a long, measuring moment. Then he stood, moving to the window, his back to her. "My father died 2 years ago. Since then, I've learned that trust is a luxury I can't afford. People see the title, the estate, the opportunity, and they become whatever they need to become to exploit it. He turned to face her. My mother sees a woman in need. I see a woman with secrets, hiding in my house, wanting access to my family's private papers. I want to catalog books, nothing more. Everyone says that at first. Seren rose slowly, matching his intensity. Then test me. Give me the most innocuous collection you have. Watch me work. Read every note I make. If you find anything suspicious, anything at all, I'll leave without argument. She stepped closer. But don't punish me for crimes I haven't committed, simply because other people have disappointed you. His teeth clenched visibly. She watched the war playing out behind his eyes, suspicion against pragmatism, fear against fairness. You'll work in the East Library, he said finally. Natural history texts only. Nothing personal, nothing financial, nothing that could compromise this family. That's acceptable. You'll report your progress to me daily. I'll review every document you handle. Also acceptable. And Miss Hale. He moved toward her, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his eyes. I won't warn you again. I've given my mother her way because she rarely asks for anything. But this is my house, my family, my responsibility. If you give me even a whisper of reason to doubt you, you'll be gone before you can pack your case. Seren held his gaze without flinching. Then I suppose I'd better not give you a reason. His features softened almost imperceptibly. Not warmth, exactly, but something like recognition. Mrs. Bramwell will show you to the East Library. You begin immediately. She nodded and turned to leave. Miss Hale. She paused at the door. My mother chose well. You don't frighten easily. The word sounded reluctant, almost surprised. We'll see if your work matches your courage. She left without answering, pulse racing, relief and determination warring in her chest. She had a position. Fragile, conditional, watched at every turn. But she had it. Now she just had to prove she was worth keeping. The East Library smelled of leather, dust, and decades of neglect. Serene stood in the doorway, surveying the disaster before her. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, crammed with volumes, arranged according to no system she could identify. Books lay stacked on tables, piled on chairs, scattered across the floor like literary refugees. A stuffed owl watched from a high shelf, glass eyes judging her silently. This was her proving ground. 3 months' work, at minimum. More if the previous librarians had been as careless as this chaos suggested. She smiled for the first time in weeks, by condition. The natural history, by condition. The natural history collection was more extensive than she'd expected, spanning 3 centuries of scientific observation, from Renaissance herbals to modern botanical surveys. It was exactly the kind of work she loved. Precise, systematic, demanding. Work that required nothing but competence and delivered satisfaction in exchange. Around noon, footsteps echoed in the corridor. She looked up to find Mr. Halstead, observing from the doorway with the same disapproval he'd worn the night before. Lady Heloise requests your presence at luncheon. Please thank her ladyship, but I'd prefer to work through the midday. I can take a tray here, if that's not too much trouble. His eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. It's not done. Household staff take meals in the servants' hall. Am I household staff? She kept her voice pleasant but firm. My understanding was that I'm employed as an archivist, which typically carries different customs. The pause that followed felt uncomfortable. I'll inform Mrs. Bramwell of your request. He retreated, dignity intact, but clearly unsettled. Seren returned to her cataloging, trying not to wonder how many enemies she'd just made. Lady Heloise appeared an hour later, a tea tray balanced in her own hands. She set it on the corner of Seren's work table, with a smile that carried more warmth than the meager fire in the grate. You've made an impression on Halstead. He's not sure whether to admire your dedication or report you for insubordination. I meant no offense. I simply work better without interruption. I understand completely. My late husband was the same. Lady Heloise settled into a nearby chair, arranging her skirts with practiced grace. May I observe for a moment? I promise not to disturb you. Of course. They sat in comfortable silence, while Seren continued working. She examined each volume methodically. Condition, publication date, notable features, and recommended placement. Her handwriting filled page after page with neat, precise observations. You have beautiful penmanship, Lady Heloise observed. Where did you learn? My mother taught me. She believed education was the only inheritance worth giving a daughter. A wise woman. She was. Seren paused, a worn volume of Linnaeus open in her hands. She died when I was 19. Fever. I've been on my own since then. Not entirely on your own, I think. Seren looked up sharply. Lady Heloise's expression was gentle but knowing. Mrs. Pemberton wrote to me, Lady Heloise continued, not just about your skills. She told me you arrived at her door half-starved, with bruises you tried to hide, and a story you refused to tell. She said you worked harder than any 3 servants and never asked for anything except to be left alone. The word settled into Serene's chest, uncomfortable and raw. Mrs. Pemberton talks too much. Mrs. Pemberton cared enough to warn me that you might need more than employment. Lady Heloise leaned forward. I've helped women before, Miss Hale. Women fleeing situations they couldn't escape alone. This house has been a refuge more than once. Does your son know? He knows I've helped women. He disapproves. She smiled sadly. He thinks I'm naive, that I invite trouble. He doesn't understand that refusing to help is its own kind of trouble. Seren set down the book carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand that you're not alone here. Whatever you're running from, whatever threatens you, you have allies in this house. Lady Heloise rose, smoothing her skirts. Even if some of those allies don't know they're allies yet. She left before Seren could respond. The afternoon passed in productive solitude. Seren cataloged 43 volumes, identified 2 significant first editions, and discovered a handwritten journal tucked behind a row of botanical texts. The journal appeared to be the work of a previous collector, filled with observations about local flora and careful sketches of wildflowers. She set it aside for further examination, noting its potential value. At 5 o'clock, the Duke appeared. He entered without knocking, moving through the library with proprietary confidence. His gaze swept across her workspace, taking in the organized stacks, the filled notebooks, the systematic arrangement slowly emerging from chaos. You've been busy. That's what you're paying me for. He picked up one of her notebooks, scanning her entries. His expression revealed nothing as he read, but she watched his eyes track across her precise descriptions, her careful categorizations. You found a first edition Culpeper. His voice carried reluctant surprise. 1653. Excellent condition, minimal foxing. Worth approximately £200, I'd estimate, though I'd recommend a professional appraisal. He set down the notebook. Where did you learn valuation? Mrs. Pemberton's husband collected rare books. I helped her inventory for sale after his death. And before that? Seren met his eyes steadily. My mother collected what she could afford. I learned to appreciate quality regardless of quantity. A crack appeared in his granite composure, not softening exactly, but something like reconsideration. I also found this. She handed him the handwritten journal. It was hidden behind the botanical texts. I believe it's the work of a previous owner, possibly dating to the late 1700s based on the paper and ink. He opened the journal carefully, turning pages with unexpected gentleness. His breath caught. "This is my great-grandmother's work." His voice had changed, lost some of its hard edges. She was a naturalist. She documented every plant on this estate before she died. We thought her journals had been lost in a fire decades ago. It was well hidden. Someone protected it, I think, deliberately. He looked at her over the journal's pages. Something complicated moved behind his eyes. Gratitude and suspicion, surprise, and something that might have been the beginning of respect. You could have kept this discovery to yourself, revealed it later, claimed greater credit. That's not how I work. She held his gaze. I'm not here to impress you, Your Grace. I'm here to do a job. This journal is part of your family's history. It belongs with you, not with my accomplishments. The moment held between them, different now, charged with something neither of them named. Continue your work, Miss Hale. His voice was quieter than before. I'll review your progress again tomorrow. He left with the journal held carefully against his chest. Seren watched him go, feeling like something fundamental had just shifted. She'd given him a piece of his family back. She'd proven she could be trusted with something precious. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. But it was a start. 3 days passed in careful rhythm. Seren worked from dawn until the light failed, cataloging volumes with methodical precision. The East Library slowly transformed from chaos into order. Shelves reorganized by subject. Damaged texts set aside for repair. Hidden treasures emerging from decades of neglect. The Duke appeared each evening at 5 o'clock, reviewing her progress with the same guarded scrutiny. He asked questions, examined her notes, occasionally offered observations about volumes he remembered from childhood. Each visit lasted longer than the one before. On the 4th morning, Lady Heloise invited Seren to walk the estate grounds. You've been buried in that library for days, she said, linking her arm through Seren's as they descended the terrace steps. Fresh air is essential for clear thinking. The Cornish coast spread before them, dramatic and wild. Cliffs dropped toward churning gray water. Wind carried salt and the cry of seabirds. The gardens closer to the house showed careful tending, but beyond them, the land grew rough and untamed. It's beautiful, Seren said quietly. It's home. Lady Heloise guided her toward a path winding through the formal gardens. I came here as a bride 34 years ago. I was terrified. The previous duchess, Kaelin's grandmother, was a formidable woman who disapproved of everything about me. What changed? She died. Lady Heloise smiled at Seren's startled expression. I don't mean that cruelly, but sometimes the only way forward is for the old guard to step aside. My husband understood that. He created space for me to become myself. They walked in comfortable silence past rose beds not yet in bloom, past hedgerows sculpted into geometric precision. Kaelin was different before his father died, Lady Heloise said suddenly. I want you to understand that. Serene glanced at her. Different how? Lighter. He laughed more easily, trusted more freely. He had friends, genuine ones, not just sycophants seeking advantage. Lady Heloise's voice carried old grief. He was going to be married, you know. 3 years ago. A lovely girl from a good family. They'd known each other since childhood. What happened? Edmund happened. My husband. Lady Heloise stopped walking, her gaze fixed on the distant cliffs. He died in a riding accident while Kaelin was in London handling business. The horse threw him on a path he'd ridden 1,000 times. No warning, no explanation. Just gone. Seren felt the weight of the words. Sudden loss carved differently than slow decline. It left no time for preparation, no chance for goodbye. By the time Kaelin arrived home, Edmund was already buried. The estate required decisions that couldn't wait. And then the vultures came. Vultures? People who'd ignored us for years suddenly remembered old friendships. Men wanted business partnerships. Women wanted marriages. Everyone saw the new Duke as an opportunity. Lady Eloise's expression hardened, including his fiancée's family. They tried to exploit him? They tried to accelerate the wedding, pushed for immediate marriage before the mourning period ended. Her father made demands about settlements that suggested he'd been planning this for years, waiting for Edmund to die so he could negotiate with a grieving son instead of an experienced father. Serene felt cold despite the mild mourning. Kaelin discovered this. He discovered that the entire engagement had been arranged by her father. The childhood friendship was real, but the romance was manufactured. She admitted it when he confronted her. Lady Eloise turned to face Serene fully. She said she did care for him, genuinely. But she'd been raised to see him as an investment, not a person. She didn't know how to separate one from the other. The pieces fell into place with painful clarity. A man who'd lost his father and his faith in love within the same terrible month. A man who'd learned that every smile might hide calculation, every kindness might conceal agenda. He ended the engagement. He ended everything. Withdrew from society, dismissed half the staff who'd served his father, cut ties with anyone who'd approached him after the funeral. He decided that isolation was safer than risk. Lady Eloise's voice dropped. He's been punishing himself for trusting the wrong people ever since. Serene thought of the cold fury in his eyes that first night, the suspicion that colored every interaction, the way he watched her like she might transform into a threat at any moment. He thinks I'm another vulture. He thinks everyone is another vulture. That's the tragedy. Lady Eloise took her arm again, resuming their walk. But I've watched him these past few days, the way he lingers over your work, the questions he asks about your methods. He's curious despite himself. Curiosity isn't trust. No, but it's the first step toward it. Lady Eloise squeezed her arm. Be patient with him, Serene. He's forgotten how to believe in people. But he's not beyond remembering. They walked the rest of the grounds in thoughtful silence. Serene learned the names of gardens, the history of follies, the stories attached to ancient trees. But beneath it all, she kept thinking about a younger Kaelin Ashford, one who laughed easily and loved freely. She wondered if that man still existed somewhere beneath the armor. That evening, the Duke arrived at his usual hour, this morning. She invited me. Should I this morning? She invited me. Should I have declined? She told you about my father. It wasn't a question. Serene met his gaze directly. She told me you lost him suddenly, that it changed you. She told you about Clarissa. The name hung between them. Serene nodded slowly. My mother believes in redemption narratives, he said quietly. She thinks if she explains my behavior, you'll understand it. Perhaps even forgive it. There's nothing to forgive. You're protecting your family. That's not a character flaw. His features registered surprise, or perhaps recognition. Most people would have used that story as leverage, played upon my sympathy to secure their position. I'm not most people. Serene turned back to her cataloging. And I don't want your sympathy. I want to finish this library and prove I'm worth my wages. Everything else is irrelevant. Neither spoke for a long moment. When she glanced up, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. You're strange, Miss Hale. I prefer unconventional. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but closer than anything she'd seen before. Continue your work. He rose, moving toward the door. I'll see you tomorrow. He paused at the threshold, looking back. My great-grandmother's journal. I've been reading it. Her observations are remarkable. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. Thank you for finding it. He left before she could respond. Serene sat alone in the lamplight, feeling something delicate and dangerous taking root in her chest. That. The letter arrived on a gray Tuesday The letter arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. Serene was deep in the cataloging when Mrs. Bramwell appeared in the doorway, her face arranged in careful neutrality. "A message came for you, Miss Hale." She held out an envelope like it might bite. "The boy who delivered it said the sender was most insistent that you receive it personally." Serene's blood turned to ice. She recognized the handwriting before she touched the paper. Those harsh, angular strokes had signed her mother's death certificate, her employment contracts, the settlement documents that transferred everything her mother owned into his control. Mortimer Vane had found her. "Thank you, Mrs. Bramwell." Her voice emerged, steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I'll read it privately." The housekeeper withdrew. Serene stared at the envelope for a long moment, willing it to be something else. A coincidence, a mistake. But envelopes didn't become different things, simply because you wished hard enough. She broke the seal. "Serene, did you imagine I wouldn't find you? That you could steal from me and vanish without consequence? I've spent 2 months tracing your movements, speaking to coachmen and innkeepers, and anyone who remembered a dark-haired woman traveling alone. Now I know exactly where you are. Thornwood Hall, the Duke of Thornwood's estate. You've found yourself quite an elevated hiding place, haven't you? I wonder what lies you told to secure your position. I wonder what the Duke would think if he knew the truth about his new archivist. Here is what will happen. You will return to Somerset within 1 week. You will return the money you stole. You will accept the marriage I've arranged with Mr. Pembroke, who, despite your behavior, remains willing to honor the agreement. If you refuse, I will write to the Duke directly. I will tell him about your theft, your deceptions, and your moral failings. I have documents, witnesses, evidence that will destroy whatever reputation you've built. The choice is yours. Come home willingly, or I will drag you back in disgrace." Your devoted stepfather, Mortimer Vane Serene, read it twice, 3 times. The words blurred and sharpened, each reading making the threat more real. She'd been so careful. Changed coaches in 4 different towns, used a false name at inns, avoided anyone who might remember her face. But Mortimer was patient. Mortimer was methodical. Mortimer never forgot a debt, real or imagined. Her first instinct was to run. Pack her single case, slip away before dawn, and disappear into another town, another name, another desperate reinvention. But running meant losing everything she'd built here, the work she'd begun, the fragile trust she'd started earning, the first safety she'd felt in years, and running meant Mortimer won. Again. Forever. She folded the letter with shaking hands and slipped it into her pocket. She couldn't think about this now. Couldn't let it paralyze her. She had work to do, progress to demonstrate, a position to justify. The cataloging continued, mechanical and precise, while her mind raced through impossible options. She didn't hear him enter. "Something's wrong." Serene's head snapped up. The Duke stood in his usual position by the door, but his expression had shifted from routine assessment to sharp attention. "Nothing's wrong." "You're lying." He moved closer. "You've barely turned 3 pages in the last hour. Your handwriting has deteriorated, and you haven't looked up once since I arrived. I'm tired. The work is demanding. Try again." She met his eyes, saw the suspicion already forming. If she told him about the letter, he'd see it as confirmation of every doubt. Another problem arriving at his door. Another threat to manage. But if she lied and he discovered it later, she'd lose whatever trust she'd earned. "I received a letter this morning," she said slowly. "From my stepfather." The Duke went very still. "Mortimer Vane. He's found me. He knows I'm here." She pulled the letter from her pocket, handing it over before she could change her mind. "He's threatening to expose me if I don't return." She watched him read, watched his expression darken with each line. When he finished, He looked at her with something she couldn't identify. "Mr. Pembroke, who is he?" "A merchant in Somerset, 63 years old, 3 previous wives, all dead within a few years of marriage." Her voice remained flat, clinical. "Mortimer owes him money. The marriage would settle the debt." "He tried to sell you." "He tried to sell what he considered his property." She held his gaze. "I disagreed about the ownership." The Duke reread the letter, tension visible in every line of his posture. "He claims to have evidence, documents, witnesses. Forged documents, bribed witnesses. Mortimer has spent years cultivating a respectable reputation. He knows how to make lies sound like truth. And you expect me to believe you over him? A man I've never met versus a woman I've known for barely 2 weeks?" The question struck like a blade. Serene felt her fragile hope cracking. "I expect nothing." She stood, forcing her voice steady. "I've told you the truth. What you do with it is your choice." She moved toward the door. His voice stopped her. "Where are you going?" "To pack. You've been waiting for a reason to send me away. Now you have one." "I didn't say you were leaving." She turned slowly. He stood by the work table, the letter still in his hands, expression unreadable. "You'll want to protect your family from scandal. I understand." "What I want," he said quietly, "is to understand why you gave me this letter instead of running." The question hung between them. "Because I'm tired of running." The words came out raw, unguarded. "I've spent 2 years looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to find me, starting over every time someone asks too many questions. I can't do it anymore. I won't. Even if staying means facing him? Even then." She lifted her chin. "I'd rather fight and lose than keep running forever." Something changed in his expression, something that looked almost like respect. "Don't pack," he said finally. "Not yet." "What?" "I need time to consider this, to make inquiries." He folded the letter precisely. "My mother would never forgive me if I sent you away without investigation. And contrary to popular belief, I do occasionally listen to my mother. It wasn't trust, it wasn't safety, but it wasn't dismissal either." "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me yet." His gaze locked with hers, steady and searching. "If Vane's accusations prove true, you'll leave in disgrace. If they prove false, we'll deal with him accordingly. Either way, this isn't over." He left with the letter, leaving her standing in the library, alone with her fear and one thin thread of hope. 2 days of silence followed. Serene worked mechanically, cataloging volumes she barely saw, waiting for the axe to fall. The Duke didn't appear at his usual hour, didn't send word, didn't acknowledge her existence. Lady Heloise remained kind, but cautious, her warmth tempered by something Serene couldn't read. The household staff watched her differently now. Whispers stopped when she entered rooms. Conversations died mid-sentence. Whatever the Duke was investigating, the servants had clearly drawn their own conclusions. On the 3rd evening, voices carried through the manor's stone corridors. Serene had retired early, unable to focus on work that felt increasingly pointless. She was in her room, staring at walls that might not be hers much longer when the argument began. "Can't simply dismiss her based on a letter, Kaelin. The man is clearly manipulative." "The man has documentation, signed statements from her former employers, records of theft. Forged documentation, coerced statements. You know how these things work." "I know that she fled in the night with money that didn't belong to her. She admitted that herself." The words drove Serene from her room before she could stop herself. She moved through the corridors, following the voices to the study. The door stood partially open. She should go back, should wait to be summoned, should stay invisible and hope for mercy. But she was so tired of waiting for other people to decide her fate. She pushed the door open. Both heads turned sharply. Lady Heloise stood near the fireplace, face flushed with emotion. The Duke sat behind his desk, papers spread before him, expression carved from stone. "Miss Hale." His voice could have frozen the Atlantic. "I don't recall inviting you. You're discussing my future. I should be present for that. You should be in your quarters, waiting for my decision. Your decision." She stepped fully into the room, weeks of tension finally breaking free. About my life, my future, my freedom. And I should simply wait silently while you sort through lies. That's precisely what you should do. "Kaelin," Lady Heloise began. "No, Mother." He stood, planting his hands on the desk. "She walked into my home uninvited and demanded I employ her. She failed to mention the man hunting her. She brought his threats to my doorstep, and now she bursts into my study to lecture me about process. I didn't fail to mention him." Serene's voice shook with suppressed fury. "I told you I was fleeing a dangerous situation. You didn't ask for details. Because I assumed you'd offer anything relevant to my household's safety. I assumed he wouldn't find me. I was careful. I changed routes, used different names, avoided anywhere he might look." Her hands clenched at her sides. "I was wrong, but that's not the same as deliberate deception." The Duke moved around the desk, approaching her with barely contained rage. "His documents are convincing. Miss Hale. Detailed. Specific. He describes incidents I can't verify because the people involved have conveniently relocated or died. Because he manufactured them. So you say. But you'd say anything to protect yourself." The accusation struck like a physical blow. Heat pricked behind Serene's eyes, but she refused to let tears fall. "Yes," she said quietly. "I would say anything to protect myself. Because no one else has protected me since my mother died. Because I've learned that truth doesn't matter when the liar has money and reputation and connections. Then perhaps you should have learned to choose protectors more carefully. Kaelin." Lady Heloise's voice carried steel. "That's enough. It's nowhere near enough." But some of the fury had drained from his voice. He stood close enough that Serene could see the exhaustion beneath his anger, the fear beneath his suspicion. "I've spent 3 days investigating her claims. Do you know what I've found? Nothing. No record of her employment with the Ashmores that can be verified. No evidence of her mother's estate or Vane's mismanagement. Nothing that proves she's telling the truth, and he's lying." "Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence," Lady Heloise said sharply. "It's also not proof of innocence." The Duke turned away from both of them, staring into the fire. "I have a decision to make. A woman with no verifiable history, no references I can confirm, and a man pursuing her with documentation and determination. One of them is lying, but I can't determine which." The quiet that followed felt heavy with implications. "Send me away, then." Serene's voice emerged hollow. "If you can't trust me, there's no point in my staying." "Serene," Lady Heloise started. "No." Serene shook her head. "I won't stay where I'm not wanted. Where every moment is spent proving myself to someone who's already decided I'm guilty." She looked at the Duke's rigid back, feeling something fragile shatter in her chest. "I thought you were different," she said quietly. "Your mother said you'd forgotten how to trust, but I thought underneath the suspicion, you were still the man who kept his great-grandmother's journal close. The man who cared about his family's history, enough to review every note I made." He didn't turn, didn't respond. "I was wrong." She moved toward the door. "I'll leave in the morning. You can tell Mortimer you've done his work for him." "Wait." She stopped, but didn't turn. "My mother believes you." His voice was rough, strained. "She's rarely wrong about people. But you don't believe her." "I don't know what to believe." Finally, he turned. His face was haunted, the mask cracked enough to show the turmoil beneath. Everyone I've trusted has betrayed that trust. My fiancé, my friends, my father's colleagues who became strangers the moment he died. Why should you be different? I shouldn't be. Seren met his eyes. There's no reason you should trust me. I'm nobody. I have nothing. I can't prove anything Mortimer says is false because he spent years building his lies, and I've spent years simply trying to survive. She took a shaky breath. But I'm telling you the truth anyway, not because I expect you to believe it, because it's all I have. The pause between them felt heavy with everything unspoken. Lady Heloise stepped forward. Kaelin, listen to me. Mother, your father would have believed her. The words fell like stones into still water. Without evidence, without proof, simply because she needed someone to believe her. The Duke's face went white. He would have looked at this woman who traveled 200 miles alone, who stood in our entrance hall dripping wet and refused to leave, who's worked harder than any 3 servants and asked for nothing except a chance. Lady Eloise's voice cracked. He would have seen someone worth fighting for, not a threat to be managed. I can't be him. The Duke's voice broke on the words. I tried. After he died, I tried to be generous and trusting and open, and everyone used it against me. So you became someone he wouldn't recognize, someone who sees enemies everywhere. Lady Heloise touched his arm. My love, you're so determined to protect this family that you've forgotten what we're supposed to be protecting. It's not the estate. It's not the reputation. It's the capacity to show kindness when kindness is difficult. Seren watched the war playing out across his features, the fear battling the memory of who he'd been, the suspicion wrestling with something that looked almost like hope. 1 week, he said finally, the words emerging like they cost him everything. I'll investigate further. Make inquiries through different channels. Speak to people Vane doesn't know I'm contacting. And if you find nothing, then I'll have to choose. His eyes met Serene's across the room. Whether to believe a woman with no proof or a man with too much. It wasn't trust. It wasn't even the promise of trust. But it was time. 1 more week to prove herself. 1 more week before Mortimer's deadline. 1 more week before everything fell apart. Thank you, she whispered. He turned away, dismissing her without words. Serene left the study with Lady Heloise's arm around her shoulders, feeling like she'd won a battle, but was still losing the war. 4 days into the Duke's investigation, catastrophe struck from an unexpected direction. The commotion grew louder, angrier. The commotion grew louder, angrier, punctuated by a woman's shrill accusations. She reached the hall to find chaos. A well-dressed woman stood in the center of the marble floor, face contorted with fury. Behind her, 2 footmen held a young housemaid by the arms. The girl couldn't have been more than 17, pale and trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. I demand she be dismissed immediately. The woman's voice carried the particular shrillness of aristocratic outrage. Searched, dismissed, and reported to the magistrate. Mrs. Bramwell stood nearby, face carefully neutral. Lady Ashworth, I assure you. You assure me nothing. My emerald earrings are missing, and this girl was the last person in my chamber. Lady Ashworth pointed at the housemaid with a ringed finger. She's clearly a thief. I want her punished. Seren recognized the maid. Nella, recently hired, shy and hard-working. She'd seen the girl polishing silver with meticulous care, folding linens with nervous precision. Not the behavior of someone planning theft. Lady Ashworth, Mrs. Bramwell's voice remained steady. Perhaps we should wait for His Grace. His Grace is not here. I'm told he's in the village, making inquiries about your archivist. Lady Ashworth's gaze swept toward Seren with venomous satisfaction. It seems this household has a habit of employing criminals. The accusation struck like a slap. Seren felt the watching servant's eyes, felt the whispered speculation solidifying into judgment. Nella sobbed harder. "I didn't take anything. Please, I didn't." "Silence!" Lady Ashworth stepped toward the girl. "You'll speak when spoken to, you little—" "That's enough." The words left Serene's mouth before she could stop them. Every head turned. Lady Ashworth's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I said that's enough." Serene moved forward, positioning herself between the woman and the terrified maid. "You're accusing this girl based on nothing but proximity. Have you actually searched your chambers? Checked whether the earrings fell behind furniture or slipped into a pocket you forgot about? How dare you address me? How dare you terrorize a child over jewelry that might be sitting on your dressing table right now?" Seren kept her voice level, though her pulse raced beneath her calm exterior. "If your earrings are missing, we should search properly before destroying someone's life over an assumption." The air crackled with tension. "You forget your place," Lady Ashworth hissed. "You're nothing, less than nothing. A woman hiding from scandal, lecturing me about propriety. I'm someone who believes in establishing facts before pronouncing judgment." Seren didn't flinch. "If the earrings are truly stolen, they'll be found. If Nella took them, she'll face consequences. But not until we've actually looked." Lady Ashworth opened her mouth to respond, but footsteps echoed from the entrance. The Duke strode in, still wearing his riding coat, face tight with controlled anger. His gaze swept the scene. The furious noblewoman, the weeping maid, Seren standing between them like a shield. "Lady Ashworth," his voice carried ice. "I wasn't informed you'd arrived." "I arrived last evening. Your hospitality has been thoroughly underwhelming." She pointed at Nella. "This girl stole from me. I want her arrested." "On what evidence?" "She was the last person in my chambers." "That's not evidence. That's sequence." The Duke looked at Mrs. Bramwell. "Has anyone searched Lady Ashworth's rooms?" "Not yet, Your Grace. We were awaiting your return." "Then we'll search now." He turned to the footman. "Release the girl. Mr. Halstead, organize a thorough examination of Lady Ashworth's chambers. Miss Hale." He paused, something complicated flickering across his face. "Assist with the search." The next hour passed in tense efficiency. They found the earrings wedged between the bed frame and the wall, exactly where they'd fallen when Lady Ashworth removed them carelessly the night before. The clasp on one was broken, explaining how they'd slipped free. Lady Ashworth departed without apology, humiliation burning in every rigid line of her posture. Nella was released to the kitchen, where Cook plied her with tea and sympathy. Seren was returning to the library when the Duke's voice stopped her. "Miss Hale." She turned. He stood in the corridor, expression unreadable. "That was reckless," he said quietly. "Confronting a guest of this house. Defending a servant against a woman with considerably more social power than you possess. It was necessary. She was going to destroy that girl's life over her own carelessness. You could have waited for me to return, handled it properly." There wasn't time. Seren met his gaze. Nella was terrified. Lady Ashworth was escalating. If I'd waited, the damage might have been done before you arrived. He studied her for a long moment. The granite in his expression yielded slightly, almost imperceptibly. "You defended her, even though it painted a target on your own back. Lady Ashworth will spread stories about the Duke of Thornwood's impertinent archivist. Let her. I'd rather be talked about than watch an innocent girl suffer for something she didn't do." The corridor felt suddenly smaller, charged with something neither named. "My father would have done the same thing," he said finally. "Stepped in without calculating the cost, protected someone who needed protecting. Your mother said he was a good man." "He was the best man I've ever known," his voice roughened. "And I've spent 3 years trying to forget that, because remembering hurt too much." Seren didn't know how to respond. This was the first crack in his armor she'd truly seen, the first glimpse of the man beneath the Duke. Thank you, he said quietly, for what you did today. For Nella. I didn't do it for thanks. I know. That's why it matters. He turned toward his study, then paused. My investigation found something this morning about your stepfather. Her breath caught. What? His documentation isn't as solid as it appeared. Several of his witnesses have criminal records. 2 of them owe him money. The Duke looked back at her. It doesn't prove you're innocent, but it proves he's not as credible as he wants me to believe. Hope flickered, fragile and dangerous. What happens now? Now I dig deeper. His gaze remained fixed on hers, intent and unwavering. And you continue your work. We're not finished yet, Miss Hale. He disappeared into his study, leaving her standing in the corridor with her pulse racing. Something had changed between them. Something fundamental. She didn't dare name it yet. But for the first time, she believed it might be real. The second letter arrived on a Monday, carried by a courier who refused to give his name. This time, Mortimer didn't write to Seren. He wrote directly to the Duke, with copies sent to 3 of the most prominent gossips in Cornwall. Seren learned about it when she heard glass shatter in the study. She ran toward the sound, arriving to find the Duke standing amid broken crystal, a letter crumpled in his fist. Lady Heloise stood in the doorway, face ashen. What's happened? The Duke threw the letter at her feet. Read it. See what your stepfather has done now. Seren picked up the paper with trembling hands. Your Grace, I write with grave concern for your household and reputation. My stepdaughter Seren Hale, whom you have unwisely employed, is not the victim she pretends to be. She is a practiced seductress who has used her feminine wiles to manipulate and exploit men of standing. Before fleeing my protection, she conducted herself shamefully with several gentlemen in our village. I have sworn statements describing her inappropriate behavior, her calculated manipulation, her willingness to use any means necessary to advance her position. I fear she has designs on your lordship's person and fortune. A young duke, recently bereaved, would be easy prey for a woman of her particular talents. I beg you to protect yourself and your family. Send her back to me, or I will be forced to share this information publicly. The scandal sheets in London pay well for stories of aristocratic folly. I remain your servant, Mortimer Vane. The letter continued, detailing supposed liaisons with named individuals, describing incidents of moral corruption, with specificity designed to sound credible. Every word was calculated to destroy her. He sent copies, the Duke said flatly. Lady Ashworth, Lord Fenimore, Mrs. Drake, who writes for 3 London gossip columns. By week's end, this will be common knowledge across the county. Seren felt the ground crumbling beneath her. It's all lies, every word. I know. His voice was strange, tight with controlled fury. But that doesn't matter anymore, does it? He's not trying to prove anything. He's trying to make the accusation loud enough that the truth becomes irrelevant. Kaelin, Lady Heloise stepped forward. We can fight this. Can we? Can we prove she didn't conduct inappropriate relationships? Can we produce witnesses to counter his witnesses? The Duke laughed bitterly. He's chosen his strategy perfectly. Attack her character. Make the allegations salacious enough that people will believe them simply because they want to. Moisture gathered in Seren's eyes, but she refused to let it fall. I should leave, before this destroys your family's reputation. If you leave now, it confirms every accusation. The Duke moved closer, his expression fierce. He wins. Is that what you want? I want to stop hurting the people who helped me. Then stay and fight. His hands gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. Don't let him write the ending to your story. Something cracked in Seren's chest. Why do you care? Last week you were ready to send me away. Last week I was a coward. The admission cost him. She could see it in his face. I was so terrified of trusting the wrong person again that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. And now I see a woman who defended a housemaid against a noblewoman, who works harder than anyone on my staff, who faces her demons with more courage than I've shown in 3 years. His grip tightened. I don't know how to trust you completely. I may never know. But I know I don't want to let Mortimer Vane win. Lady Heloise stepped beside them. We fight together, as a family. Seren looked between them, these two people who had no reason to protect her, who were risking their reputation for someone they barely knew. He'll destroy you, she whispered. He'll make it his mission. Then we'll destroy him first. The Duke's jaw set with determination. I have resources he doesn't know about, connections he can't anticipate. If he wants a war, I'll give him one. Kaelin. Lady Heloise's voice carried warning. Be careful. Men like Mortimer Vane are dangerous when cornered. So am I. He released Serene's shoulders, but didn't step back. Mother, I need you to contact Aunt Philippa. She knows everyone in London society. If Mortimer's accusations reach the gossip columns, we need someone planting counter-narratives. And Miss Hale? The Duke looked at Serene with something that made her breath catch. Miss Hale stays exactly where she is. If Mortimer wants her, he'll have to come through me. The words settled into her chest, warm and terrifying. She'd never had anyone fight for her before. Never had anyone stand between her and danger. She didn't know how to carry the weight of it. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me yet. His expression darkened. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Mortimer won't stop with letters. He'll come here eventually. Try to force the issue. Are you prepared for that? Seren thought of the man who'd controlled her for years, who'd made her feel worthless and small and invisible. Thought of facing him again, this time with allies instead of alone. Yes, she said. I'm prepared. Good. The Duke turned away, already planning, already strategizing. Because I have a feeling he's going to make his move soon. He was right. The very next morning, Mortimer Vane arrived at Thornwood Hall. Seren recognized the carriage before it stopped. She was in the library, forcing herself to work despite the dread pooling in her stomach, when she heard wheels crunching on gravel. Something made her move to the window. Something made her look. The carriage was black and worn, the horses poorly kept. But the crest on the door was unmistakable. Her mother's family crest, stolen along with everything else. Mortimer Vane had come to claim her. She should have run, should have hidden, should have done anything except stand frozen at the window, watching her nightmare step onto Thornwood's grounds. He looked exactly the same. Tall, thin, impeccably dressed despite his debts. Salt and pepper hair swept back from a face that projected respectability and concealed cruelty. He smiled as he approached the entrance, the same smile he'd worn when he locked her in her room, when he announced her engagement to Mr. Pembroke, when he told her she was worthless. The study door opened behind her. The Duke's voice cut through her paralysis. He's here. Seren turned. Kaelin stood in the doorway, dressed formally, expression carved from granite. I saw. You don't have to face him. I can handle this alone. No. The word emerged stronger than she expected. I'm done hiding from him. I'm done letting him make me small. His expression transformed almost imperceptibly. Pride, perhaps. Or recognition. Then we face him together. They reached the entrance hall as Mr. Halstead opened the front door. Mortimer swept in like he owned the place, his gaze immediately finding Seren. There you are, my dear. His voice oozed false concern. I've been so worried. Mr. Vane. The Duke's voice could have frozen the summer air. You weren't invited. Your Grace. Mortimer executed a bow that managed to be both deferential and condescending. I apologize for the intrusion, but the matter is urgent. My stepdaughter has clearly deceived you about her circumstances. I'm here to take her home before she causes further damage. Your stepdaughter is a guest in my house, not a prisoner to be collected. A guest? Mortimer's laugh was sharp. Is that what she told you? Let me explain what she actually is. A thief who stole 200 pounds from my personal safe. A liar who's fabricated stories about abuse to justify her crimes. A manipulator who's clearly trying to seduce her way into your household. That's enough, Lady Heloise's voice rang out. She descended the staircase with regal fury. You will not speak about Miss Hale that way in my home. Lady Heloise, Mortimer's smile didn't waver. I understand your charitable instincts, but you've been deceived. Serene is very good at appearing sympathetic. She learned it from her mother, who used the same tactics to trap me into marriage. Something snapped in Serene's chest. Years of silence, of submission, of swallowing rage to survive. All of it burned away in a single blazing moment. My mother loved you. Her voice emerged low and fierce. She trusted you. She made you guardian of her estate, her daughter, everything she treasured. And you spent 5 years destroying all of it. Serene, you gambled away her inheritance. You sold her jewelry to cover your debts. You tried to sell me to a man who'd buried 3 wives because you owed him money. She stepped forward, watching his mask flicker. You don't get to stand in this hall and speak about manipulation. You don't get to call me a thief when you stole everything my mother built. Mortimer's expression shifted, the genial facade cracking. You forget yourself, girl. I raised you. You imprisoned me. There's a difference. I gave you a home. You gave me a cage. And the moment I escaped it, you've done nothing but try to drag me back. The room crackled with tension. Mortimer's face had gone red, the pretense of concerned guardian abandoned. You ungrateful little... He moved toward her, hand raised. The Duke stepped between them, his presence like a wall of ice. Touch her, Kaelin said quietly, and I will destroy you. Mortimer froze, calculation flickering behind his eyes. You're threatening me? Over this? I'm promising you, over this woman who has more courage and integrity than you will ever possess. The Duke's voice carried deadly certainty. I've investigated your claims, Vane. Your documentation is forged. Your witnesses are paid criminals. Your entire case is built on lies designed to terrorize a woman who had the audacity to escape your control. You can't prove. I can prove everything, and I will, publicly, if you take one more step toward her. The transformation in Mortimer was fascinating and terrifying. The mask dropped completely, revealing the predator beneath. You think you've won something? His voice was venom. You think taking her side protects you? I'll destroy you both. I'll write to every newspaper in England. I'll tell them the Duke of Thornwood has been seduced by a common whore. Get out. The Duke's voice was soft, which made it more dangerous. Get out of my house before I have you thrown out. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You'll receive a legal summons within the week. My solicitors will be pursuing claims for defamation, harassment, and fraud. Kaelin stepped closer, towering over Mortimer. Every lie you've told, every document you've forged, every person you've bribed, all of it will be exposed. By the time we're finished, you won't have a reputation left to speak of. For the first time, fear flickered across Mortimer's face. You wouldn't. Watch me. The standoff stretched, seconds feeling like hours. Then Mortimer stepped back, straightening his coat with shaking hands. Fine. Keep her. But remember this moment when she betrays you, when she takes everything she can and disappears. That's what she does. That's what she is. He turned and walked out, his carriage departing in a cloud of dust. Serene stood frozen, trembling with adrenaline, and years of suppressed fury. She'd faced him. She'd spoken truth to the man who'd terrorized her, and she was still standing. But the victory felt hollow. Mortimer's final words echoed in her mind. That's what she does. That's what she is. He's wrong. She looked up. The Duke stood before her, expression fierce and tender at once. Everything he said about you, every word, it's wrong. How do you know? The question came out broken. How do you know I won't disappoint you eventually? Won't prove him right? Because I've watched you. He stepped closer. I've watched you work when no one was observing. Watched you defend a frightened housemaid against a woman who could have destroyed you. Watched you face your abuser without flinching. His hand rose, hesitating near her face. I've watched you, Seren, and I've seen exactly who you are. Who am I? Someone brave enough to choose truth over safety. Someone strong enough to survive what would have broken most people. His voice dropped. Someone who makes me remember what it felt like to believe in people. A tear escaped down her cheek. You shouldn't believe in me. You barely know me. Then let me know you. His thumb brushed her tear away. Let me prove that not everyone who gets close has an agenda. Let me show you that trust doesn't always end in betrayal. She should have pulled away, should have protected herself from the hope building in her chest. Instead, she leaned into his touch. I don't know how to let someone in, she whispered. I've been alone so long. So have I. His forehead pressed against hers. Maybe we can figure it out together. That night, sleep refused to come. Serene lay in her narrow bed, staring at unfamiliar shadows, replaying the confrontation over and over. Mortimer's face when she'd spoken back. The Duke's voice promising destruction. The feeling of his hand against her cheek, gentle despite his fury. At midnight, she gave up on rest and made her way to the library. The room was dark except for dying embers in the fireplace. She moved by memory to her usual chair, sinking into its familiar comfort. The leather smell, the old paper smell, the peace of being surrounded by books. This place had become her sanctuary without her noticing. Can't sleep either, she startled. A figure shifted in the shadows near the window. The Duke moved into the ember light, still fully dressed, a glass of untouched brandy in his hand. I didn't see you. I've been here for hours. He set down the glass, thinking. About Mortimer? About you. He sat in the chair across from her, the same chair he'd used that first night he'd come to review her work. About what he said before he left, about whether he was right. Her chest tightened. Do you think he was? I think he's the most contemptible man I've ever encountered, and I think his cruelty toward you explains everything I've seen since you arrived. What have you seen? Someone who never quite believes she's safe, who works herself to exhaustion because she thinks she has to earn every moment of security, who's startled by kindness because she's only known conditional tolerance. His voice softened. I recognize it because I've been doing the same thing. Different reasons, same walls. Seren felt exposed in ways she couldn't name. I didn't mean to. You didn't do anything wrong. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. I need to tell you something. Something I should have said days ago. What? The investigation I conducted. The inquiries about your stepfather. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I didn't start them because I doubted you. I started them because I needed proof that would hold up in court. The words didn't make sense. In court? I've been building a legal case against Mortimer Vane since the first letter arrived, documenting his forgeries, tracking his bribed witnesses, connecting his debts to his motivation, not because I believed his accusations, but because I knew eventually we'd need to destroy him publicly. Serene stared at him, pulse quickening. You were protecting me, from the beginning. I was trying to, badly, with all my usual suspicion and distance getting in the way. Self-loathing flickered across his face. I made you think I doubted you. Made you feel like you had to prove yourself over and over. When the truth is, I believed you the moment you told me about Mr. Pembroke. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was terrified. The admission came out raw, unguarded. Believing you meant trusting you. Trusting you meant risking everything. And I've spent 3 years avoiding that risk at any cost. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, moonlight silvered the cliffs. My father trusted everyone. He saw the best in people even when they showed him their worst. When he died, I decided that was weakness, that his kindness made him vulnerable. Kaylin, but watching you these past weeks, I've realized something. He turned to face her. His kindness wasn't weakness, it was courage. He chose to believe in people knowing he might be disappointed. He chose to trust knowing he might be betrayed. Seren rose slowly, moving toward him. And you stopped choosing. I stopped being brave enough to try. His voice cracked. Until you walked into my house and refused to leave. Until you showed me what real courage looks like. She stood before him now, close enough to see the vulnerability he'd hidden for so long. Close enough to touch if she dared. I'm not brave, she whispered. I'm terrified constantly. Of Mortimer. Of losing this place. Of caring about people who might disappear. That's exactly what bravery is. His hand rose to cup her face. Feeling the fear and moving forward anyway. You've done that every single day since you arrived. So have you. She covered his hand with hers. You let me stay when it would have been safer to send me away. You stood between me and Mortimer. You're building a legal case to protect someone you barely know. I know you. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I know you work by lamplight until your eyes blur. I know you talk to the books when you think no one's listening. I know you gave my great-grandmother's journal back when you could have used it as leverage. Warmth gathered behind her eyes. Those are small things. Small things reveal true character. My father taught me that. He stepped closer, his other hand settling at her waist. I know the important things, Seren. I know you're honest. I know you're kind. I know you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. What else do you know? I know I'm falling in love with you. The words emerged rough, almost desperate. And I know that terrifies me more than anything Mortimer Vane could ever do. The confession hung between them, fragile and enormous. I'm terrified too, Seren whispered, of wanting something I might lose, of believing in something that might disappear. Then we'll be terrified together. His forehead pressed against hers. And we'll choose to trust anyway, the way my father would have, the way I should have from the beginning. She kissed him. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was desperate and hungry and tasted of tears and hope and years of loneliness finally breaking. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close. She felt his heart racing against her chest, felt the trembling in his hands as they tangled in her hair. Two broken people finding something neither had expected. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Stay, he whispered. Not as an archivist, not as someone we're protecting. Stay because this is where you belong. For how long? For however long you want. His eyes held hers, fierce and vulnerable. For forever, if you'll have me. The words settled into her chest, warm and terrifying and perfect. Forever is a long time. Not long enough. He kissed her again, softer this time. Not nearly long enough for everything I want to show you. They stood in the moonlit library, holding each other, learning what it felt like to choose trust despite fear. It wasn't a promise, it wasn't a guarantee, but it was a beginning. Mortimer Vane's retaliation came swiftly. Within 3 days, whispers spread across Cornwall like wildfire. The Duke of Thornwood had been ensorcelled by a scheming seductress. His household was in chaos. His judgment was compromised. The gossip columns printed carefully worded insinuations. Invitations to summer events stopped arriving. Longtime acquaintances crossed the street to avoid Lady Heloise in the village. And still, Mortimer pushed, demanding meetings with magistrates, spreading lies to anyone who would listen, trying to force enough scandal that Seren would have nowhere left to hide. The Duke's response was devastating. He invited every prominent family within 50 miles to Thornwood Hall. Not a private gathering, but a formal assembly. And when they arrived, curious and judgmental and eager for spectacle, he gave them something none of them expected: the truth. Seren stood beside him in the great hall, dressed in borrowed silk, her heartbeat quick beneath her composure. Lady Heloise had insisted on the gown, the styled hair, the appearance of belonging. "They need to see you as one of us," she'd said, "not as an outsider to be pitied." 50 faces stared at them with various degrees of hostility, curiosity, and schadenfreude. Lady Ashworth sat in the front row, satisfaction barely concealed. Lord Fenimore whispered to his wife. Mrs. Drake clutched a notebook, ready to record scandal for her columns. The Duke raised his hand. The murmuring stopped. "Thank you all for coming. I know you've heard rumors about Miss Hale. I know you've been told she's a thief, a seductress, a manipulator, who somehow ensnared your foolish young Duke." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "I've invited you here to share the truth." He gestured to a footman who began distributing documents. "What you're receiving is a compilation of evidence gathered over the past month. It details the actual character of Mr. Mortimer Vane, who has been spreading these accusations." Seren watched faces shift as they read. Surprise, confusion, growing discomfort. Mr. Vane married Miss Hale's mother for her modest estate, then systematically depleted it through gambling and mismanagement. When his debts became unmanageable, he attempted to sell his stepdaughter to a 63-year-old merchant as payment. Gasps echoed through the hall. Miss Hale escaped. Mr. Vane has pursued her ever since, using forged documents and bribed witnesses to discredit her. His goal is simple: retrieve his property so he can complete the sale. His property? Mrs. Drake's voice carried shock. That's how he sees her, not as a person, as an asset to be traded. The Duke's voice hardened. Every accusation he's made is documented fabrication. Every scandal he's whispered is calculated revenge against a woman who dared to escape his control. Lord Fenimore cleared his throat. "These are serious allegations, Your Grace." "They are, which is why I've filed legal proceedings against Mr. Vane. Defamation, fraud, attempted trafficking in persons." The Duke's gaze swept the room. By month's end, he'll be answering to a magistrate instead of spreading lies at dinner parties. The room fell silent. Seren could see the calculation happening behind careful faces, sides being chosen, allegiances being reconsidered. Lady Ashworth stood abruptly. "This is all very dramatic, but we have only your word." "You have my word." Lady Heloise rose, her presence commanding despite her small stature. "And the word of my late husband's family, who have investigated Mr. Vane's background independently. And the word of Mrs. Pemberton in Devon, who employed Miss Hale and witnessed her character firsthand. And the word of a man who lost his father 2 years ago." The Duke's voice softened. "Who spent that time building walls against everyone, seeing threats everywhere, trusting no one. Miss Hale walked into my house and reminded me what courage actually looks like." He turned to face Seren fully, taking her hand. "This woman survived things that would have broken most people. She escaped a monster with nothing but determination. She worked harder than anyone in my household and asked for nothing but a chance." His thumb traced her knuckles. "She taught me that trust isn't weakness, that believing in people isn't foolishness, that protecting the vulnerable is exactly what my father would have expected of me. Moisture traced down Seren's cheeks, but she held his gaze. Miss Hale is not a scandal. She's not a liability. She's under the protection of this family. His voice carried across the silent hall. Anyone who questions that is questioning me. Is that understood? No one spoke. No one moved. Then Lady Heloise began to clap, slowly, deliberately. One by one, others joined her. Lord Fenimore, Mrs. Drake, even Lady Ashworth, though her expression suggested she was swallowing glass. By the time the applause faded, the room's energy had transformed entirely. The Duke released Seren's hand, turning back to his guests. Now, I believe refreshments are being served in the drawing room. I hope you'll all stay and allow Miss Hale to demonstrate exactly why she's earned this family's trust. The crowd dispersed, conversations buzzing with new information. Some approached Seren cautiously, offering tentative kindness. Others congratulated the Duke on his handling of a difficult situation. A few simply left, unwilling to be associated with either side. But the damage was done. Mortimer's narrative lay shattered. The truth had been spoken publicly, irrevocably. As the last guests filtered toward refreshments, Seren found herself alone with Kaelin in the corner of the great hall. "You destroyed your privacy for me," she whispered. "Exposed your family's business to 50 gossips. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He cupped her face, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't felt fall. "I'm done hiding. Done letting fear dictate my choices. If protecting you means the whole county knows our business, then the whole county can know. What if they judge you? What if the scandal? Let them judge. Let them whisper." His smile was fierce and gentle at once. "I have my mother's approval. I have my father's memory. In years, she didn't care who was in years. She didn't care who was watching." The legal proceedings against Mortimer Vane concluded 6 weeks later. He was found guilty of defamation, fraud, and multiple counts of document forgery. His remaining assets were seized to pay damages. His name became synonymous with disgraced manipulation. The merchant Mr. Pembroke quietly withdrew his association, wanting no connection to such scandal. Mortimer disappeared into obscurity, broken and bitter, exactly as he'd tried to break Seren. She learned of the verdict in the library that had become her sanctuary. The Duke found her there, leafing through his great-grandmother's journal once more, surrounded by the order she'd created from chaos. "It's over," he said quietly. She looked up, searching his face. "Truly over?" "Truly." He sat beside her, taking her hand. "He's gone, Seren. He can never hurt you again." The words settled into her chest, releasing tension she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. Tears spilled, silent and healing. Kaelin held her while she cried, not with pity, but with understanding. Two people who knew what it meant to carry fear for too long, finally learning to set it down. When the tears faded, she found herself laughing. "What is it?" he asked, smiling despite confusion. "I just realized I have no idea what to do now. I've spent so many years running, hiding, surviving. I don't know how to simply live." "Then let me show you." He stood, pulling her up. "Starting with something I should have done weeks ago." He led her through the manor, past curious servants, past his mother's knowing smile, out into the gardens that overlooked the Cornish cliffs. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. "My father proposed to my mother here," Kaelin said quietly. 35 years ago, in this exact spot. She says he fumbled the words terribly, forgot half his speech. But the sunset was perfect. Serene's breath caught. "Kaelin, I had a whole speech prepared." He laughed nervously. "I've been practicing for days. Something about partnership and trust and building a future together. What happened to the speech? I forgot it the moment I looked at you." He took both her hands, sinking to one knee in the dying light. "So I'll just say what's true. I love you, Seren. I love your courage and your kindness, and your stubborn refusal to let anyone decide your worth." Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't look away. "I love that you walked into my house and demanded to be heard. I love that you defended a frightened housemaid against a woman who could have destroyed you. I love that you've made me remember who I wanted to be before grief made me small." His hands tightened around hers. "I'm not offering you protection anymore. I'm not offering you shelter. I'm offering you partnership, equals, standing together, building something neither of us could build alone." He reached into his pocket, producing a ring that glowed like captured firelight. A ruby surrounded by tiny diamonds, set in gold, worn smooth with generations of wear. "This was my grandmother's. She wore it for 53 years. She said it reminded her every day that love was worth the risk." Seren couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "Marry me, Seren. Not because you need protecting. Not because I'm offering security. Marry me because we're better together than apart. Because you make me brave. Because I want to spend the rest of my life proving that trust doesn't always end in betrayal." The sunset blazed behind him, exactly as it had blazed 35 years before. The moment stretched, perfect and terrifying and inevitable. "Yes." The word emerged, small but certain. "Yes, I'll marry you." His face transformed with joy as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. He kissed her there on the cliff tops, surrounded by fire and gold and the crash of waves below. Two people who had learned to trust despite every reason not to. Two people choosing each other, deliberately and completely. When they finally returned to the house, Lady Heloise was waiting with champagne and tears and an embrace that felt like home. "Welcome to the family," she whispered. "Properly, this time." 1 year later, the library was finally complete. Seren stood in the doorway, surveying the transformation. 3,000 volumes cataloged, organized, protected. Hidden treasures brought to light. A family's history preserved for generations. It had taken her a full year, far longer than the original estimate. But she'd refused to rush, refused to compromise. This library deserved the same care she'd given everything since arriving at Thornwood Hall. "Admiring your work?" She turned. Kalen stood behind her, dressed casually, his cravat loosened in the way he only allowed at home. "Admiring our work." She linked her arm through his. "You helped with the translation of those Italian texts. Don't think I've forgotten. I translated 3 pages. You translated 300. Every contribution matters." They walked through the shelves together, passing volumes that held memories now. The Culpeper first edition she'd discovered her second day. His great-grandmother's journal, carefully restored and prominently displayed. New acquisitions they'd hunted together at book fairs and estate sales, building the collection into something extraordinary. "Your mother wants to discuss the expansion," Seren said. "She thinks we should add a reading room for the village. Let people access the collection." "A library for everyone." Kalen smiled. "My father would have loved that. So would mine. My mother, I mean." Seren paused by the window, looking out at the grounds that had become home. She believed books could change lives, give people possibilities they couldn't imagine otherwise. She was right. Kalen wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You're proof of that." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching sunset paint the cliffs in familiar fire. A year had changed so much. Lady Heloise's quiet charity had expanded into a formal foundation, providing resources and training for women escaping impossible situations. Seren had become its administrator, organizing what had once been random kindness into systematic support. 3 women had found refuge at Thornwood Hall in the past year. One now worked as a governess in London. One had opened a small shop in the village. One had married a young farmer who saw past her circumstances to the person beneath. Every success felt like a small victory against everything Mortimer had represented. "I have something for you," Kaelin said quietly. "A wedding anniversary gift, though it's a few days early." She turned in his arms. "We agreed no gifts this year." I lied. He pulled a small leather notebook from his pocket. "Open it." The notebook was old, worn, filled with familiar handwriting. Her breath caught. "Is this your mother's garden journal? I found it 3 months ago, buried in a lot of estate papers I purchased from a country auction. I didn't realize what it was until I saw her signature." Seren opened the book with trembling hands. Her mother's observations filled every page. Descriptions of flowers, planting schedules, sketches of beloved blooms. Her voice, preserved in faded ink. How did it end up in an auction? Mortimer, probably. He sold everything he could after she died. This must have been mixed in with other documents. Kaelin's voice softened. "I've had it authenticated. It's genuine. It's really hers." Tears coursed freely down her face, but they felt like healing. "Thank you," she whispered. "You found a piece of her I thought was lost forever. You've given me back pieces of myself I thought were lost forever." He kissed her forehead gently. It seemed only fair. They held each other in the library she'd built, surrounded by books and memories, and the knowledge that some stories had happy endings, after all. Seren thought about the woman who'd fled in darkness, with stolen coins and terror. About the woman standing now in her husband's arms, secure in love that had been earned, not given. She defied a duke on her first night in his house. She'd never imagined where that defiance would lead. But that was the thing about courage. It didn't require knowing the ending. It only required taking the first step. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that step led somewhere extraordinary. Thank you for staying until the very end. If their journey reminded you that courage often looks like asking for help, that trust is built through consistent choice, and that everyone deserves someone who will defend them publicly and love them privately, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your presence here is why these stories exist. They're written for you, inspired by you, and made meaningful because you choose to listen. Until the next story finds us, thank you for being here.